Alrighty. This is part 4 of Politics at Home with Holmes. Can Alberta prosper? Is it possible?
Well, of course we can. Can we prosper as an independent country is the question.
Yes.
And the answer is yes.
And if you want to know how the answer is yes, this is episode 4 of analyzing the Alberta Prosperity Project document of the value of freedom. And we are analyzing it as the plebeians living in Alberta.
Yeah, we are not doing we read it so you don't have to. This is not a too lazy did not read. We're doing this for those that may not actually sit down to take the time to do said thing, but they would be willing to listen to it. They'd be willing to watch a podcast about it, and or anyone that sees this as valuable for sharing, offering to neighbors, friends, families. If it's a tool that you believe that you can use to help educate your fellow citizens into the potential of the possibility that we can stand on our own 2 feet as a country with one another as citizens in a non-partisan manner. We're doing this not for any party purposes of any kind. This is for us, the people of Alberta.
Well said. For those who would like to follow along, if you have your own document, you can go to the albertaprosperityproject.com. This is the top of the page. You just do a teeny bit of scrolling. You can download it so you have it permanently on your device, or just click this lovely little picture and it'll open up as a PDF. I've maximized it for those who are reading along. Last time they pictured the difference about what do we have to finance that we don't already finance, and what are the things we do already finance. If we were independent, Alberta would retain 44 to 47 billion annually in just federal taxes. And so set up costs or increases in the Indigenous budget, for example, which is in this plan, that would come out of our federal taxes. But then they went over things like licensing fees for fishing licenses, hunting, aviation, or postal services. Those already are in Alberta's annual budget, and therefore that doesn't have to come out of the money we would be retaining from the federal transfers. That is stuff we already pay as Albertans.
User fees, yeah.
They are user fees and provincial stuff
And we could improve upon it.
So that was last episode to give a little bit of a recap.
So now we are moving on, page 18 of the document, for an overview of an integrated independent Alberta financial landscape. So this analysis integrates a fiscal landscape of an independent Alberta, incorporating both the replacement of federal services and Alberta's existing provincial budget, expenditures, and taxation. This analysis estimates the total revenue available, federal taxes, retained plus provincial taxes, total expenditures, federal services plus provincial spending, and the resulting fiscal balance. An underlying assumption in these calculations is that in recognition of the need to ensure long-term fiscal responsibility for the independent Alberta government, using spending limits and controls will be embedded into the Alberta Constitution, including balanced budget requirement, mandate that the government maintain a balanced budget over a defined economic cycle, example 4 to 5 years, allowing deficits during economic downturns but requiring repayment within a set time frame. Include exceptions for emergencies, example natural disasters, economic crises, with strict criteria and legislative approval, example supermajority vote. Debt limits, cap total public debt as a percentage of GDP, example 20 to 30%, to prevent unsustainable borrowing. Transparency and reporting. Require the government to publish quarterly audited, detailed, easy to understand budget reports, including revenue sources, expenditures, and long-term fiscal projections. Little side comment that I'll make on that is that, in as much as I do appreciate the statement easy to understand budget, in the Dark Souls community of gaming, we could also as citizens get good. And we could learn how to figure out the budget stuff as well so that we can be alongside them.
By the way, when it says allowing deficits during economic downturns, does that mean less spending?
No, allowing deficits. That there may be a need for having to borrow beyond your means to get through a tough time. So that has to kind of like supermajority vote, meaning the government would actually have to. It's an interesting concept, this idea. Got to get the permission of the people. Basically explain it and go, this is what things are looking like. This is what we may have to do. How do you guys feel about it? And then put it to a referendum.
Yeah, and it said, but requiring repayment within a set time frame. So if we decide that we're going to borrow within, like, not really within our means, but we're trying to try and boost ourselves up again, it's saying that we have to basically pay back that debt within a certain time frame.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty standard. You know, most banks, when they set up a loan, they require a certain time period with which, you know, the money has to be paid back. Hopefully we can come up with a better usury plan, like maybe none. But anyways, that's a topic of discussion for another point in time. So we got the transparency and reporting, spending oversight. Require legislative supermajority, example 2/3 approval for significant spending increases or new programs exceeding a set percentage of the budget. Prohibit off-budget spending or hidden liabilities, e.g. unfunded pension obligations. Require taxpayer approval for any budget which imposes additional taxes. Taxation principles. Enshrine a commitment to low, simple, and transparent taxation, requiring any new taxes or rate increases to be approved by a referendum.
So that's, you know how it says require taxpayer approval for any budget which imposes additional taxes? I'm assuming that just plays into what was just read, which is they want transparent taxation. And when it says approved by a referendum, it means like, okay, so if we're going to have a certain project that's going to require a bit more bling from Alberta in order to make it happen, it's the people that get to decide, yes, I like this idea, we should go through with it.
Yeah, I guess an example of this too, if we're going to play into even our own family's sort of passions for the future, then we would have to consider like visions that go well beyond this 4 to 5 year sort of cycle as well. So let's talk, for example, we do decide that we're going to put it to the citizens as time to have our country's infrastructure with high-speed rail. And we know, like, okay, so we bring in, we consult, we realize what it's going to take. Now we're definitely moving into, okay, well, over the next 20 years, this plan has to get like laid out. These are going to be the costs. This is going to exceed
the budget.
However, it's kind of like, say, for example, China runs its high-speed infrared structure at a deficit. The government loses money with the high-speed rail infrastructure, but the country as a whole's GDP benefits dramatically. So they're willing to take the hit on the governmental spending. It looks like an actual deficit, which we would think would be irresponsible spending of the government, but it is not, because
it's balancing out
that's
over
right.
here.
Rising
it's like
tides
it looks
float all
down
ships.
here, but it's coming up here. So
yeah, and that, I mean, if you're going to talk about having something enshrined in the Constitution for moral principles and aptitudes, then infrastructure projects should benefit human beings. It should be what benefits the quality of life for the people that dwell within the country. You should not be coming up with infrastructure projects that are a deficit to the people. That's why in our previous video, when I was like, well, I believe that you could do better than like building casinos, on indigenous lands. It's like, no, there's far more prosperous things that I mean, even they themselves are completely capable of that because they're people. So, anyways.
Also, I just had another question. This is why this episode's gonna be longer, because now it's painting. That's because it's painting a picture, though,
of the moral
of a
society.
financial landscape, right? So, and we already know the value of economics, right? In terms of anybody's prosperity becoming better, it's just if you're financially more prosperous, then it gives your mind and the ability to go and think beyond things of just simple survival and money, because you are actually prospering. So it was just an idea that kind of sparked in my brain from reading it, where it was saying the taxes, might be held with a referendum to say, what do you think, people, about this thing? What do we think when it comes to specific investors into said projects? Do we also get to have a referendum on the sort of investors that we're, wanting or not wanting, and or if not that, will that be included in the sort of audit of who's been contributing to said projects and such?
this is starting to go into policy. Like in my mind, that's a whole different episode because that's actually something to be discussed. Because now we're talking about a problem that we are facing in our culture today, and this is not just in Alberta, but it is including in Alberta, NGOs, outside federal interferences and so forth. And this is a topic of more opinion on our part and research that we can back it up. But I just feel like in order to stay in the theme of what it is that where we're trying to go.
How about this? It's a good question for probably Albertans to be considering.
And we could also just have it like as an at homes with homes. How do we see Alberta, like an independent Alberta? If maybe at the end of the whole thing, we can actually like do a follow-up episode. So maybe jot that down. Keep that question to make a note of it.
I don't have a pen.
I do.
Yes, I have a jar of pens.
I have a jar of pens.
And I have paper here.
Just last question. It said prohibit off-budget spending or hidden liabilities. Example, unfunded pension obligations. What does it mean by unfunded pension obligations?
So when it's saying prohibit off-budget spending, because some have made statements of like your medical system is more like a liability than it is an investment, because there's a lot of fraud that happens downstream from something like that. I believe that's why they use this example. So I think that this is their way of trying to like see if we can expose that, like so that people can clearly see if a fraud is being attempted. Right. Like just another layer of transparency so that people that are savvy enough about the plumbing of said structure can kind of go, hey, now, wait a minute, this is fraud. And then we can do something about it.
Yeah.
Taxation principles enshrine a commitment to low, simple, and transparent taxation, requiring any new taxes or rate increases to be approved by a referendum.
Yeah.
Resource revenue management. Establish a constitutionally protected sovereign wealth fund with clear rules for fund contributions to save a portion of resource revenues for future generations. Require mandatory regular royalty rate review to assess necessary adjustments, royalties based on results and on projections. Highly desirable is to define a royalty mechanism formula to moderate downturns or capitalize on windfall profits to allow Albertans to share in windfall profits in case of energy price increases and reduce royalties to ensure the resource industry remains viable in downturns.
So I remember asking what windfall profits were, so I'm going to ask again, what are windfall profits?
You won the lottery. A windfall, a batch of money, a financial increase. That's why it's a windfall. But it puts more wind in your sails. There's a boosting to your financial position that was not entirely foreseen.
I see. So now when it's talking about that in relation to royalties, it's saying that when we do get windfall profits, it's saying actually in cases of energy price increases and reduce royalties to ensure the resource industry remains viable in downturns.
Yeah, so that an example of that, say for many years while I worked on the drilling rigs, for 17 years, so 7.5 was in Canada. One of the cycles was breakup. It's called breakup, right? And so one of the frustrating things in the industry was being able to sustain guys that would be willing to work on the rigs, because the rigs didn't run all year round. There would be 2 to 3 months sometimes downturn due to weather, due to being able to get the machines access into certain areas of the Muskeg and areas around Alberta and just Canada for that matter. But then guys would be like, okay, well, I'm gonna work, consistently on average for like maybe 7 to 8 months out of a year, but 4 months I'm not. So if we transpose that same type of scenario onto you as a country, we could find ourselves in a feast or famine type scenario. A biblical reference is Joseph's 7 years of prosperity and then 7 years of famine that were happening to Egypt. I'm just using this as an example, as a story. So, responsible management of that time when there was a lot of fat to go around and everybody's brains were all chunked up on good proteins. When all of a sudden things were going to get a little slim, you had some stuff put away for that rainy day. That's what this is alluding to, right? Because there is inconsistencies. Like life is not a straight line.
Yeah, so when it I feel silly for asking this, but can someone explain to me again what a royalty is?
Royalties are funds. There's going to be so many people that are just going to rip me apart for my definitions on here because this is me being a pleb answering these questions versus like people that actually
Yeah.
have. So please forgive my semantics. I know that I'm treading into the territory of those that are far more intelligent than I am. All that to say, royalties are somebody's making money on a market. The shareholders, kind of like the investors, or the people that buy the stock that have done the investing, they're going to get royalties if the company that like Apple does well, and then Apple share prices go up, and so then there's going to be royalties paid out by the company to its shareholders for the good job that it did managing blah blah blah.
So in this example because they're talking about resource revenue management. So they're alluding to specifically Alberta oil and such. So when it's saying royalty, define a royalty mechanism to moderate downturns or capitalize on windfall profits to allow Albertans to share. So instead of, because royalties in terms of like the definition, it'd be payments made to the patent owners, the copyright, or the person,
or shareholders,
or
right?
the shareholders in exchange for using their property, for example. But in this specific example, it's like we are the shareholders because we are Albertans. It is going to be our land, not crown land anymore, not federal land, hence no more federal leasing on the navigation and airport systems. I think they're implying we get to profit as if we retain the royalties or get some of the royalties when those scenarios happen. That's why they want a fluctuating royalty rate. That way you can compensate for Albertans still benefiting for when those things happen.
Yeah, and they might even be able to set up systems where there's actually some sort of from farm to table scenarios.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
But there's also going to be a percentage where you don't want to just hand that out to everybody. You want to save for a rainy day. So
yes.
So I feel like we would
well, and they said they want to establish a protected sovereign wealth fund.
Yeah.
And they also have that under resource revenue management. So yeah, that's implied.
Yeah, like I just looked it up. It said Alberta oil royalties work by having the government, representing Albertans who own 81% of mineral rights, collect a share of resource revenue from companies using different frameworks for conventional oil and oil sands, often with lower rates initially pre-payout until costs are recovered, then higher rates post-payout, and factoring in oil prices and production volumes, with payments sometimes taken in kind as oil/bitumen rather than cash. The system balances government revenue with encouraging private investment using tiered rates and incentives like the new well royalty rate for new wells.
I do believe that you would have to still want to try to handle that responsibly, because by all means it would be awesome to encourage a farm to table where people like, oh wow, like our oil sector is doing well and we're getting like maybe a quarterly or biannually sort of boost to the wallet, so to speak, but under the guise of an agreed percentage is going to a rainy day fund, because life doesn't, it's not a straight line.
To help fund that future high-speed rail.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and it's saying that in the downturns when the prices go down, then you need to be smart about telling people, hey, okay, royalty rise, you're not going to be seeing very much. Or we made it so that we accounted for that so it can stay relatively steady.
Right.
And like, yes, in periods where it's like it's doing so well, it's either apt for you to give more to Albertans to potentially help with that staying so well, or it's one of those, okay, we're going to put a certain sect of that away for the times where it's not going to be doing so well.
Right.
Okay.
So long-term fiscal planning. Mandate multi-year fiscal frameworks. Example, 10 years plans, as I aforementioned earlier, to ensure sustainability and alignment with economic and demographic trends. Require stress testing of budget resilience against potential economic shocks. Example, commodity price drops. Constitutional enforcement. Utilize the second house of government, Senate, or potentially a constitutional court to adjudicate disputes over fiscal accountability provisions. Ensure amendments to fiscal rules require broad consensus, public referendum to prevent political manipulation. So, some key assumptions. I'm going to go through a lot of numbers here. Federal tax contributions 21 2021 to 2024. Alberta's federal tax contributions are estimated at 68 to 75 billion annually, with 22 to 26 billion returned in transfers, yielding an overcontribution of 46 to 49 billion. Components: personal income tax, PIT, 35 to 37 billion. Corporate income tax, SIT, 10 to 11 billion. Goods and services tax, GST, 9 billion. Excise taxes, 2.7 to 2.8 billion. EICPP, 15 to 17 billion. An independent Alberta would retain the full 68 to 75 billion, replacing federal transfers with its own services. Should we say that again?
I can say it. It says an independent Alberta would retain the full 68 to 75 billion dollars, replacing federal transfers with its own services. There you go.
It's yo money.
It's yo money.
Federal services costs estimated at 22.7 to 31.6 billion annually, with 2.8 to 5.7 billion in initial setup costs one time, based on the prior table. National defense, 3.5 billion annually, 1.2 billion setup. International relations, 0.5 to 1 billion annually, 0.2 to 0.3 billion setup. Health programs, 8 to 10 billion annually, 0.5 billion setup. EI, 2.3 billion annually, 0.1 to 0.2 billion setup. PP, 3.6 billion annually, 0.2 to 0.3 billion setup. Border and customs, 0.3 to 0.5 billion annually, 0.1 to 0.2 billion setup. Policing, RCMP replacement, 0.74 to 0.76 billion annually, 0.37 billion setup. Indigenous services, 4.2 to 5 billion annually, 0.05 to 0.1 billion setup. Other services, example, federal courts, Canada Post, regulatory, 0.91, 1.27 billion annually, 0.2 to 0.4 billion setup. Additional fees, examples, Canada Post, NAV Canada, are user funded or covered by the 47 to 50 billion net contribution. 22.7, 31.6 billion annually, 2.846 to 5.736 billion setup. Alberta's provincial budget, 25 to 26. Revenue, 74.1 billion, including 17.1 billion from non-renewable resources, 123 million increase in education property taxes, and a new 8% PIT bracket for income up to 60,000 effective January 1st, 2025, but without the without the 4 billion disaster contingency funding. Expenditures, 75.3 billion, including 2.6 billion for schools, 1.1 billion for family social supports, housing, 2.5 billion for roads/bridges. Deficit, 1.2 billion per Fraser Institute to 5.2 billion per RBC Scotiabank EY, reflecting conservative revenue projections and spending increases. Debt, Alberta's provincial debt is 78.4 billion as of 2023, with interest costs included in expenditures.
So when it's saying Alberta's provincial budget, is that saying like what it could look like or what it is right now?
This is what it is right now.
Okay. It says, 2025
to
to
2026. Yeah.
Okay.
Alberta's pension plan. Using the very conservative case of 167 billion CPP asset transfer, half of Alberta's 334 billion actually owned. The APP owed, thank you. The APP asset base in 2025 is 183.7 billion, generating 23.4 billion annually, 18.4 billion investment returns at 10% plus 5 billion contributions. This covers 3.6 billion annual CPP cost, with surplus revenue reducing the need for new contributions. Needless to say, if Alberta receives the full funding as laid out in the LifeWorks report, 334 billion, these numbers would roughly double. Limitations. Federal tax contribution estimates are approximate. Provincial budget figures are from 25 to 26 projections, subject to change based on economic conditions, example, oil prices. Setup costs for federal services are one time but may spread over years, impacting initial budgets. So, total revenue for an independent Alberta. An independent Alberta would retain both federal and provincial revenues. Federal taxes retained, 68 to 75 billion annually, PIT, SIT, GST, excise taxes, EICPP. Provincial revenue, 74.1 billion, 25-26, including non-renewable resources, 17.1 billion. Education property taxes, including the projected 123 million increase. PIT with new 8% bracket for income up to 60,000, reducing revenue slightly but offset by other taxes. APP revenue, 23.4 billion, 18.4 billion returns plus 5 billion contributions, with contributions already in federal provincial totals. Total revenue, excluding APP overlap, 68 to 75 billion federal, 70 plus 74.1 billion provincial equals 142.1 to 149.1 billion annually. Note the 5 billion APP contributions are included in the 5 to 9 billion EICPP federal estimate, so not double counted. Surplus from APP. The 23.37 billion APP revenue offers the 3 to 6 billion pension cost, leaving a potential surplus of 17.37 to 20.37 billion for other uses. Examples: reducing contribution rates, enhancing benefits. Well, it's looking all good, all those numbers. Anyway. Okay, so total expenditures for an independent Alberta. Expenditures include current provincial spending plus the cost of replacing federal services. So, provincial expenditures, 75.3 billion, 25 to 26, covering healthcare, education, infrastructure, and social services. Federal services replacement.
You don't have to
go-
read.
you don't have to go
International
through all of
Relations,
it.
Health Program, EICPP, Border and Customs. Yeah, there's a chart on this too.
Yes.
Well, then we already said it technically.
Yes.
It's
We
just
have.
really trying to make it clear.
We're emphasizing. All right, so the author's note.
Oh wait, so the total annual, yeah.
Annual expenditures, 70.3 billion provincial plus 17.1 to 30.2 billion federal services equals 98 to 106.9 billion. Setup costs 2.8 to 5.8 billion, assumed as a one-time expense in the first year or amortized over severals, example 1 to 1.9 billion annually over 3 years. The author's note: based on experience in large-scale information technology projects, that there are considerable improvements which can be achieved by using modern systems, AI where appropriate, and streamlining and simplifying processes as regulations also will be simplified. Estimates of cost improvements are not included in this document, but experience suggests cost reductions as high as 50% are plausible.
Like cost reductions in
Just like, in other words, like streamlining, better efficiencies with AI or technology.
Getting better at running a country.
Yeah.
Oh, and also
like, wow, what if we do improve our infrastructure? Then all of a sudden, even your costs for that transportation. So, like an independent Alberta's transportation costs, we might be able to streamline that. Well, not might be able to. We don't even have any high-speed rail in Canada. So the answer is yes.
Yes.
So fiscal balance.
Yeah, this is the balance. So
Okay.
now they're going to calculate based off of all of the revenue that we just read and the expenditures. Where are we left off as a potential?
just to clarify, didn't it say in the beginning of this document that that doesn't technically include what we get in our oil and gas, or what we could get actually in our oil and gas? Because
Yes, they
like,
are not calculating the
calculated-
potential profit from our resource
they
sector.
calculated it obviously when they said this is the revenue, right, where it's at 74.1 billion, right, provincial revenue. I'm sure that was like, it says non-renewable resources, right?
They do it later in the future projections about where we could go. This is still they're trying to keep it conservative. It's not until the very end of the document where we get into the future possibilities.
Yes.
Fiscal balance.
Fiscal balance. So revenue, 142.1 to 149.1 billion. Expenditures, ongoing, 91.8 to 105 billion. Surplus excluding setup, 29.4 to 48.3 billion. Surplus with setup taken entirely in first year, 23.6 to 45.5 billion. APP surplus, 17.4 to 20.4 billion, potentially reducing contribution rates. Comparison to current fiscal position. Current provincial budget, 25 to 26, obviously projections. Revenue of 74.1 billion, expenditures of 75.3 billion, and a deficit of 1.2 to 5.2 billion. Current federal contributions. Alberta's 68 to 75 billion in federal taxes yields a net loss of 44 to 47 billion after 22 to 26 billion in transfers. Independence impact. Retaining 68 to 75 billion in federal taxes eliminates the 44 to 47 billion net loss. I am going to read that again. retaining 68 to 75 billion in federal taxes eliminates the 44 to 47 billion net loss.
Well, I mean, it's saying that once we have that and it eliminates our net loss, that also covers federal services.
I mean, it's just one of those, like, I think it would be nice if we had our destiny in our own hands. So we're at the covers federal services, 16.4 to 29.5 billion, and combined with provincial revenue creates a significant surplus, 26.3 to 44.3 billion, even with setup costs compared to the current 1.2 to 5.2 billion deficit.
Yeah, I want to really emphasize that is if in our current provincial budget of 2025 to 2026, it's saying that we get a revenue of 74.1 billion and we are spending 75.3 billion. That number's bigger, what we're spending, okay, versus what we actually get. We are running Alberta entirely on a deficit right now. If we were an independent Alberta, we could afford to be running deficits and still be making money. Like it wouldn't.
Well, then
just
it wouldn't be a deficit.
It wouldn't be a deficit.
Well, yeah, like then we wouldn't exactly. That's what I was gonna make the point of. You guys beat me to the punch.
So to play with this idea just a little bit, if we would like to gracefully say, conservatively speaking, no, not the political conservative, the actual word conservatively speaking, you would consider what MayCee just said as an F up to our budget. Like we're messing up, right? We're not as efficient or responsible as we could be. You know, a little too much spending your tomorrow today type of attitude, right?
Yeah.
We could actually afford to get away with having those mistakes. Now, I'm not saying we should have those mistakes and that we shouldn't try to find a way through to improve, but I just would like to put it out there that actually means that we could be effing up as we learn, and we could absorb the mistake. That would almost be like R&D. That would almost be like research and development
what I was saying.
For what it would take to build your own country.
That's what I was thinking in the sense of even if you think of scientists trying to create new, needing money for patents and stuff and like for their own research and development, right? That's exactly what is the best case scenario is you actually have the ability now to tinker essentially and see what sticks. And if something doesn't, then you're like, oh, okay, I'm not going to take that loss entirely. But I also think of it on a perspective of even our ability to invest. Like our ability to help other countries, perhaps. Like now we can actually see ourselves in a position where we are not necessarily always the needing of receiving. We are actually being able to give to our other countries based on our economic success. And then we could see where that leads in terms of just overall grand scale global R&D.
Yeah, well, it's a beautiful experiment because a lot of Dad alluded to either in this episode or the previous that, you know, this is scary because it's new and people cannot fathom Alberta standing on its own 2 feet if it's possible. And this document and accounting for, we can take on all the federal services. We can add more to the federal services. We can still take on the Alberta budget. And after all of these expenditures, with including our current revenue, we still end up with a surplus of 29 to 48 billion dollars. So we can experiment. We can figure out how to progress. We have a grace period. We will have grace periods because of the surplus that we would be gaining as Albertans. So is it scary? Yes. Will it look new? But we can afford it. We can afford it. There's 29 to 48 billion surplus.
Yep. All right. So in the interest, that was we were in the independence impact. So in the interests of being very conservative, this document has not factored in a number of very positive contributions, which would be gained by an independent Alberta. Economic impact of the massive external investment in what would be one of the lowest taxed, least regulated economies in the world can hardly be overstated. The economic activity gained by recovering the $500 billion in investment lost due to Canadian federal government regulations and taxation would add sustainability to this fiscal position.
Substantially to this fiscal position.
Mm-hmm. The Frontier Center for Public Policy also identifies that gaining international markets for Alberta oil and gas would add an additional 26.5 billion to this fiscal position.
That's
and I would like to add something, just because I also believe that we, instead of shipping out a raw product out of our province, or sorry, out of our country, we could then start going into the, well, why don't we build all these products ourselves?
Refine it.
And then start,
Make our rubber.
Expanding. I'm just like expanding our capabilities. That type of infrastructure and power we could do. And then all of a sudden, sure, we'd like to send some stuff to the world market, but in all actuality, it wasn't really as necessary as we thought, because we're going to use this product to build amazing things. So, implications for an independent Alberta. Fiscal capacity. While it is not desirable to continue taxation at the current levels in an independent Alberta, the preference being to provide tax reductions to Alberta citizens. This analysis shows a very strong fiscal capacity with a 29.4 to 48.3 billion surplus, or 3.6 to 45.5 billion with setup costs, which optionally allows significant investments in infrastructure, 2.5 billion currently, healthcare, education, 2.6 billion, or economic diversification. Tax reductions for Albertans. A very strong contender for the projected surplus is direct tax reductions. Using the low end of the financial capacity, take 29 billion, and applying it to selected tax reductions, you can see it is possible in the new Alberta to eliminate the federal GST, as well as eliminate the current provincial personal income taxes and corporate income taxes. If the high end of the financial capacity, give or take 47 billion, is applied to selected tax reduction, it is within the range of possibility, considering the variability in the numbers, to eliminate all the current federal, personal, and corporate income taxes, PIT, CIT.
Question, sorry, just for clarification. When it says using the low end and then using the high end, where did those come in again? These numbers was 29 bill or 47 bill for the...
That's
that was the fiscal capacity above.
That's the surplus. Yeah, so if we go back to here, so the surplus, excluding setup, 29.4 to 48. So they just went...
Oh, I see. Got you.
Yeah, so they did 29.47 to be...
Okay.
Yeah. Low end of the surplus, high end of the surplus. What can that do for our taxes?
This still allows the new Alberta government to have a balanced budget, especially with the assumption that there would be a drive to streamline and a drive to increase government efficiency, eliminating waste and optimizing its services as an independent nation. When you hear the term eliminating waste, that's you bureaucrats. I'm sorry, we've got to figure out something better for you to do with your time. This analysis does not seek to rethink the taxation approaches, but even cursory examination shows that an independent Alberta could very easily pursue a wide range of tax reductions, including flat tax rate for PIT and CIT on the order of 10%, alongside a AST consumption tax similar to the current GST, potentially with rates lower than 5%.
And how do we, Dad, what do you think? Because when it comes to PIT and CIT, that's personal income tax and corporate income tax. And if that's run at a flat rate, it's like, what does that say about all of the people that are used to or are in favor of the idea of, tax people that are earning a higher income as opposed to others?
So this is also about potentiality. Mm-hmm. There was a great podcast, Brett Oland from Bull Valley Credit Union and Martin Armstrong got to share time with Shaun Newman on the Shaun Newman podcast. Shout out to Shaun Newman. In that conversation, Martin Armstrong's suggestion, because they were trying to talk about currency for Alberta, and that's a different topic. I'm not going to get into that. But when it comes to having a flat tax and a sustainable plan, so not just for people that would like to invest within our country, right? Which, we would have to vet and so forth, but they would be encouraged to know, right? It's like, okay, so Alberta has they got a stable government. They've got their ducks in a row within their borders. They're looking for expansion in particular sectors, and they just run a straight up flat tax. You can plan your budget knowing, okay, so much of the revenue that my company is going to produce, and this works on personal and corporate. Like, this is good for entrepreneurs or business owners as well, on for your middle class, right? Like the smaller business owners. We would obviously have to have like tariffs of some kind when it comes to like stuff being flooded into our market within our own country. That's another topic, another discussion for another episode. The reason why the flat tax consistency over time is that then you can start actually thinking about infrastructure or R&D on large levels, like annual levels. You can start to get not just a 4-year plan or a 5-year plan based on presidential election cycles like the United States. You could all of a sudden find yourself in positions where now we're looking at where we would like to be as a nation, and with infrastructure built based on company relationships that we have with our own citizens, first and foremost within our country, but then also outside foreign influence with other countries that would like to come in, and they can see, like even Martin Armstrong said, you guys become an independent Alberta and you start to run these types of financial strategies, capital goes where it's treated well. So all of a sudden, even he said, I'd do an Armstrong economics office in Alberta, in your country, right? That's what getting that type of consistency. But we'd have to be vigilant. There's a lot of things that we'd have to be vigilant about. And like I said, that it's a larger discussion, but I think that kind of answers. Did that answer the question? Okay. Debt management. Alberta's $78.4 billion debt 2023 could be reduced rapidly with the surplus, lowering interest costs, included in the $75.3 billion expenditures. APP advantage. The $17.4 to $20.4 billion APP surplus could lower pension contribution rates, examples from 9.9% to 5.9%, or enhance benefits, boosting disposable income. Risks. Economic volatility. Example, declining oil prices, reducing $17.1 billion resource revenue, or trade disruptions could impact revenue. Setup costs may require short-term debt, if not amortized. Currency considerations and discussion. I'm going to read this, but definitely as a reference to those that saw the episode that came up on the screen, and if you didn't, that episode on the Shaun Newman podcast, currency is discussed specifically because I know that was on Brett Oland's mind. And Martin Armstrong had a brilliant response, because the value of your country is its people.
I will put it in the description for everybody.
Following its independence from Canada and declaration of sovereignty, Alberta introduces the Alberta dollar, ABD, as its national currency to cement economic independence. To facilitate a seamless transition, Alberta temporarily adopts the US dollar, USD, capitalizing on its global stability while developing the ABD framework. The ABD would partially be backed by a newly established gold, Bitcoin, and oil reserve. Gold for its international recognition as a store of value, a strategic Bitcoin allocation to embrace decentralized finance, and a newly established strategic oil reserve leveraging the province's vast oil wealth. This oil reserve, securely stored and transparently managed, bolsters the currency's credibility by tying it to Alberta's dominant energy sector. Together, this tripartite backing of gold, Bitcoin, and oil positions the ABD as a stable and innovative currency, reinforcing Alberta's economic resilience and global financial standing. So that's a framework. I really would encourage people to go and listen to that conversation. Also, too, shout out to Shaun Newman in his Cornerstone event. These types of thinkers show up and they discuss this. They discuss these types of topics as well. There's a lot of people with their eyes on Alberta while we're at this particular junction of our own historical movement. And we're right near the end, and we'd like to try to have this episode tied up in as best a timely manner as we can muster. Swap and credit line discussion. Independent Alberta seeking to secure swap lines and a line of credit with the United States and USD would need to leverage its economic strengths and strategic importance to negotiate favorable terms. Alberta would approach the U.S. Federal Reserve and major financial institutions, emphasizing its robust energy sector, which supplies significant oil and gas to the U.S., ensuring mutual economic benefits. By demonstrating fiscal discipline, a stable regulatory environment, and a commitment to free trade, that word always bothers me, Alberta could build confidence in its creditworthiness. Swap lines could be established through bilateral agreements, allowing Alberta to access USD liquidity during short-term revenue shortfalls, while a line of credit could be secured through U.S. banks or international financial institutions backed by Alberta's resource revenues. These mechanisms would facilitate seamless trade, stabilize Alberta's economy against commodity price volatility, and provide a buffer for unlikely but unforeseen fiscal challenges, ensuring economic resilience as a new nation. Appropriate reserves need to be established to pay all existing Alberta government debt and contingent liabilities.
So we finished that. Obviously,
We are done this section.
Dad obviously will have some things to say about that swap line. And
We can take a minute. So everybody, that concludes what we were covering this part of the episode. From going on here, we are going to do discussions probably about the last two the currency considerations and the swap credit line discussion, because they're ideas. And then as normal plebeian Albertans, MayCee wants us to discuss what we like and what we don't like, because of course this is potential ways that we can go forth in an independent Alberta, but some ideas are better than others. So if you want to listen to that, stick in. Otherwise, we will tune in next time for part 5.